A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome on the 29th Annual General Meeting of EU Chambers. Today, we celebrate our rich past, our achievements, and our growth over the years. We express our gratitude to the ones who have been with us all these years and who have supported us, be it our member companies, the current, the former presidents, vice presidents, and the board. The Chamber has over the years organized many activities for the benefit of its members. And today, the Chamber has organized a panel discussion on lessons from EU for Indian corporates on the ESG agenda. We have with us esteemed speakers to enlighten us on the topic. As we begin with the first part of the AGM, let me introduce you to Mr. Manish Bhatnagar, the President of EU Chambers. Mr. Bhatnagar was named the Managing Director and a member of Board of Directors of SKF India Limited in 2018 and drives strategy, operations, and governance structures for all SKF group of companies in India. Having lived in Asia, Europe, and the US, he brings a strong global perspective along with local customer centricity to drive execution and results. Mr. Bhatnagar, let me first congratulate you on being re-elected as the President of EU Chambers. Sir, the last 1 year has been amazing with you under your leadership, and we really look forward for the coming year as well. So may I request you to kindly address the attendees.
Yeah, good afternoon. I hope you can see me and hear me okay. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's
not visible.
With great pleasure, I'm privileged to welcome you all to the Council's 29th AGM, even though it's a virtual meeting. I would like to sincerely thank our guest of honor, Ms. Renata Bhaskar, Minister, Councillor, Head of Trade and Economic Section, the delegation of the European Union to India. Our panelists today, we have a distinguished list. Mr. Raghav Raj Kanoria, MD India Power Corporation, Mr. Sudeep Mal, MD Huhtamaki India Privated, Mr. Dibirit Sen, MD and Head Banking, HSBC, Professor Chaudhary, Director IIT Mumbai. It's been an honor and a privilege for me to serve as the President of the Council for the year 2020 to 21 and to lead the Council in playing a key role in enhancing the bilateral relations between India and the EU. Today's panel discussion is an extremely relevant one and an important one. It's lessons from the EU for Indian corporates on ESG. ESG, as you know, stands for environmental, social, and corporate governance. We all know it's a dire need of our times. Investing in ESG is essential investing in sustainability. Even though it may not fetch immediate returns, it will certainly benefit all of us in the long run for generations to come. In India, of course, ESG adoption is still at a very nascent stage, and there is much more room for growth. And as India rapidly integrates with the global value chain, more and more overseas companies will gain confidence in their Indian partners who are able to demonstrate compliance with internationally accepted ESG benchmarks. And therefore, today's panel discussion becomes so much more important for Indian corporates. And it's my pleasure to welcome all of you distinguished panelists to this afternoon. The COVID pandemic, we're all recovering from that, and hopefully we've seen the end of it, at least in the short term. But to me, it has truly emphasized that both public and private sectors need to factor into their strategies the impact of externalities, environmental externalities, climate change, etc. And therefore, again, the seminar becomes so much more important to us. On behalf of the governing board and myself, I must place on record that the Council has received tremendous support from the EU Ambassador to India, His Excellency Mr. Ugo Astuto, Ambassador EU to India and his office, other EU embassies, and the Consul General's offices of EU member states in Delhi and Mumbai. I also would like to thank and express my sincere appreciation to all the board members and other member companies for extending their support and cooperation during my presidentship. And finally, I would like to acknowledge the very good work done by our Secretariat, and I have no doubt in the coming years, the Council will scale even greater heights, thus further cementing better trade relations within the EU member nations and of course with India. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bhatnagar. Now I would like to invite Dr. Renu Shom, the Director of EU Chambers. Dr. Shom is responsible for the overall activities of the organization. She is a pivotal in managing day-to-day business operations, in coordinating with internal, external departments for smooth functioning of the organization. She is a doctorate in economics with over 2 decades of experience in business operation, stakeholder management, administration, and people management. Dr. Shom, may I invite you to kindly run through the activities of the Chamber in past. Ma'am, kindly unmute yourself.
Thanks, Anvita and President, for setting a ball rolling. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my proud privilege to welcome you all once again. And I can see the participation is in quite good number. And we look forward to host you physically in coming months soon. As we see, there are many participants attending today who from India as well as from Europe who are not our members. Therefore, I would like to talk very briefly about the chambers. Can we have a presentation, please? Okay, by the time they set up the presentation, let me very briefly tell you about what the chamber is. The chamber was set up in 1992 with an objective to promote the business between European Union and India. It is one of the important links between EU and India. It is also a platform for EU and Indian businesses to explore the business possibility of exports, joint ventures, partnership, technology, and networking. Its membership comprises of a European and Indian companies. Can we have can you please, next slide. Okay. So its membership, just a minute, please hold on for a second. Okay. At the time of the formation, the constitution of the organization was, we have a chief patron who was a delegation of a European Union to India, and the bilateral chambers and the binational business committees. The current status of the organization is we have a chief patron who is the delegation of a European Union to India. Then we have a sector committees, then European companies, binational business committees, bilateral chambers, and the advisory board, and of course the Indian companies. So today, this afternoon, we conducted our business session of the AGM, where we have the new governing board was elected. So let me welcome all of you gentlemen, and it's my proud privilege to introduce you all. So we have Mr. Manish Bhatnagar, Managing Director of SKF India. He has been reappointed as the President of the Chamber. Mr. Piyush Kaushik, Head of the Healthcare Innovation Center, Philips India. He has been reappointed as the Vice President of the Chamber. Mr. Anupam Johri, Chief Representative of the Raiffeisen Bank from the Indo-Austrian Business Committee. He has been reappointed. Captain Avinash Batra, Chairman of Seahorse Shipping Agencies, Indo-Danish Business Committees. He has been also reappointed. Mr. Joy Lakilan, Chief Representative of the BBA Bank. He is also reappointed as the Indo-Greek Business Committee. Mr. Meghnad Mitra, CFO Agri Sector, Mahindra and Mahindra. He represents the Indo-Finnish Business Committee. Mr. Shishir Joshipura, CEO and MD of a Praj Industry. He represents the Indo-Irish Business Committee. And Mr. Shalil Shroff, Managing Director for Punjab Chemicals. He represents the Indo Business Committee. The next set of our appointment is of the bilateral chambers. Every year, few bilateral chambers, they nominate some representative who become the part of the governing board of the EU chamber. Mr. Nicky Frank, Chief Executive Officer of a DHL Global Forwarding South Asia. He has been represented by the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Oscar Esteban, CEO of a province, President of an Indo-Spanish Chamber of Commerce. He has been the new joinee. And Mr. Sharad Kumar Saraf, Managing Director of a Technocraft Industry. He is a President of an Indo-Romania Chamber. He has joined us as one of a governing board member. And last but not the least, from the Chamber of Commerce, Bilateral Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Sumit Anand. He's a President of an Indo-French Chamber of Commerce. So he would be representing the IFCI. And all these years we have been having the election of the members for the 3 positions from our membership. So this year also we conducted the election, but since we have only 3 positions and we got only 3 nominations, so all the 3 gentlemen have been elected without contesting the election. So Mr. MR, he is the head of our territory and the head of our CIB, BNP Paribas India. He has been one of our nominated members and he has been elected. Mr. KB Bala, founder of Indus Capital Private Limited. He is also one of a governing board member representing the membership. And Mr. Vinayak Hazare, director of Intergest South Asia. He has been also elected. Congratulations, gentlemen. I look forward to work with all of you. Talking about the chambers, we have the special invitees. As I mentioned, chief patron is the delegation of a European Union to India, and all the embassies and the consulates of EU countries, and the Associated Chamber of Commerce and Industry of India, then Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and other such chambers and association. As time to time, they have been invited by the governing board. It's my proud privilege again to thank President and Vice President who have very ably led the organization during 2021, and we look forward to working with you once again. I know the formal vote of thanks will be proposed by our Vice President, but I would be failing in my duty if I am not going to be acknowledging the contribution and the support which I have got during these all years. I had the privilege of working under all these gentlemen as a president. So let me again introduce you and thank them officially. Mr. Ashok Bharat, Managing Partner, Merck's Business Advisor. In 1920, Mr. Nicholas Simon, Deputy CEO, SBI Fund Management during 1819. And Mr. Amit Nivsarkar, Vice President Corporate Affairs, Tata Consultancy during 1718. Captain Avinash Batra, Chairman, Seahorse Ship Agencies. He was a president for 2 years. And Mr. Chandramouli Srinivasan, sorry, I missed it. He was also the president, during 15 to 17. And Mr. Anupam Johri of Raiffeisen Bank. He was also our president. Mr. Sharad Kumar Saraf, Managing Director of Technocraft, and Mr. R. Mukundan. He was in 2010 and 11. Thank you, sir. We look forward to your support in near future as well as. We also have the advisory board, which is being led by Dr. Ajit Ranade. He's a chief economist of Aditya Birla Group, as well as Mr. Ramesh NG. He's the CEO and Managing Director of a Stockholding Corporation of India. Now let me talk about some of our committees which we have. We have 6 committees, sector committees. These committees, I would say, are very, very proactive committees which we have formed. So the Automobile Committee is being headed by the Mr. Balbir Singh Dhillon. He is the head of Audi India, and the co-chairman is Mr. Saket Hardikar. He's from AIUT Technologies. And we have few other members also, which are already displayed on the screen from various sectors. They all represent the automobile sectors. Then we have the Banking and Financial Services Committee, which is being headed by Mr. Narayan Sadanandan. He's a former MD and CEO of SBI Pension Fund. and Mr. Jyoti Saran, CEO of Chartered Finance Management. Again, we have 3 representatives as a member in the committee. Education Committee, we have Professor Dr. Uday Salunke, Group Director of Wellington Institute of Management Development and Research. He is the chairman. His deputy is Professor T.M. Satyanarayan from Overseas Education Consulting Services. And we have 4 members who are already very leading personalities in the educational sector. Their names are being displayed. We have the Information and Communication Technology Committee. The chairman is Mr. Ashank Desai, head and the non-executive director and the founder and the former chairman of Mastiff. Dr. Joseph Shi, he's a senior consulting partner of our CUSP, and which is again very active committee, I would say, being headed by the eminent personalities from the sector. Then we have a Legal and Regulatory Committee. The chairman is Mr. Sohail Nathani, managing partner of Economic Law and Practice. And the co-chairman is Mr. Rashri Chakravarti, senior residence partner and the head of a Mumbai office of a Kuchar and Company. So these committees, when we formed, the whole objective was to bring a greater focus into our activities as well as to render more effective services to our members. Through a team of sectoral experts. And we know that the knowledge sharing is one of our key aspects for our member companies. So, and we hope these committees, we have conducted a lot of events under these committees, and we look forward to your participation. Last not the least, Shipping and Logistics Committee, which is being headed by Mr. Abhijit Nair of FEI Cargo. And Mr. Bhavik Mota, he's a regional director, and which is again being supported by very eminent personalities in the relevant sectors. Moving forward, the membership, which is something, definitely we would like to talk about. The year 2021 was unusually challenging one, as the COVID pandemic has disrupted our life and the activities of the society. Remarkably, we have learned to deal with such hurdles and have also turned into the opportunities to develop new ways to enhance the value and the services for the members. So we are fortunate to have a large and a diverse membership, which is rich in experience and experience. So we have a total membership of 606 plus, out of which I would say the total number of European companies are 108 and the Indian companies are 498. But these Indian companies, when I say Indian companies, of course, they have a business or either they're exporting or having some joint ventures with the European companies. Otherwise, they would not like to be the part of a EU chamber. And during the year, we have 76 new joining as a member, and 430 companies have renewed, and we have 100 companies as a life member. So talking about the growth over the years, I would like to say membership and sponsorship basically constitute over 60% of our total revenue. There was a drop of over 49% in the sponsorship, but however, the membership front, the numbers are not very discouraging. It is just less than the 2% of drop. So we can say members are still, are associating with us. The next is the composition of the sector wise. So you can see our companies we have in the chambers is a very diversified membership. Chamber represent almost all sectors. The next classification of our membership is a region wise. We have a southern, 20% of the companies are based in the southern region, then 20% are again in the northern region, and 2% in the eastern region, and the western is of course 58%. And the category wise, 17% are life membership, large are 21%, and SMEs are 62%. So these are some of the testimonial which we would like to share with the audience. Distinctly, many of our member companies have come out with outstanding performance during this testing time. So we would like to, acknowledge their contribution, and so this is what they say about us. Some of the companies, they have given us their testimonial, what they feel about the chamber. Now, connecting with the members, as a chamber, we have also realized if we have to connect with our members, we need to be very proactive digitally. So this is the snapshot of our digital presence. Business First, these are some of our publications, which is a bi-monthly magazine which covers the latest development on EU and India. Then we do receive the MECR, which are the monthly economic reports from the Indian embassies in EU countries, which covers the in-depth information about the trade and investment opportunities. And then the members directory, which again covers the details of the members, embassies, and consulate in India and EU. Then we have the e-newsletter, which is a monthly newsletter, which again covers a lot of information about the EU-India trade, and also the information about the new members and all. And our website, which I can say, which is a single point for all updates about the activities, which also covers the business and trade leads from India and EU, which is one of a very attractive feature, I would say, because we post a lot of information about the business opportunities, and that is how our members are taking the advantage of these. And of course, there are some other features are there, sponsored opportunities, advertisement opportunities. And talking about the social media, either it's Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube and all, we can say over the year, if we compare the last year, we have seen the growth of almost 50%. So these are some of the webinars which we have conducted under the various sectors committees. Shipping and Logistic Committee conducted a webinar. Then again, the Financial and Banking Services Committee conducted a webinar. Again, this is another event which was conducted by the Shipping and Logistic. And the Automobile Committee has made a representation on the sector, and some of the recommendation for a strong revival of the sectors which we made. And these are some of our webinars which we have organized along with some of our member companies. And these are some of the webinars which we have organized with other organizations other than our member companies. And these are some of our highlights. We had organized this very interesting session where Mr. Suresh Prabhu was the chief guest. And this was our last year annual general meeting where Dr. Sinsen, ambassador of Embassy of the Republic of Slovenia, he was the chief guest. And we have a very, very interesting panel discussion, which was participated by Mr. Sunil Mathur, MD of Siemens, then Mr. Amit Nair from the Paytm, and Mr. MR was also there from BNP Paribas, and Mr. Robin Banerjee of Kepti Hens, Mr. Hitendra Dave of HSBC, which was moderated by Mr. Chandrabali Srinivasan. This was one of event which we have organized with the city of Łódź, Poland, which was attended by the Deputy Mayor of the city of Łódź. And of course, the Council General was also the guest of honor, Polish Council General. So before I hand over to Anvita, I would like to acknowledge the support of all the sponsors. Of course, this would be again, thanks would be proposed by our Vice President, but I would be again failing in duty if I don't acknowledge the support of these, all the sponsors, without whom support we would have not able to organize such a good event for you all. So platinum sponsor Gold, Punjab Chemicals, gold sponsor BNP Paribas, LBS Possard, ICICI Bank, All Cargo, silver sponsors SKF, Seahorse, NRB, Indus, India Power, Philips, HSBC, Haropa, Rama, August Consulting, Technocraft, and ECGC. Thank you very much, and over to you, Anvita.
Thank you, ma'am. It's time for us to release the activity report. So, ma'am, may I request you and Mr. Bhatnagar to kindly release the activity report. Thank you so much, Dr. Shom. Mr. Bhatnagar, would you like to mention something about the activity report?
Well, thank you for releasing it. It's a pleasure to be releasing it. I hope the audience enjoys it as much as we've enjoyed putting it together. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. The attendees will receive the activity report, as well as the members will receive the activity report soon. Thank you so much, Dr. Shom. Thank you so much, Mr. Bhatnagar, for being with us. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my proud privilege to invite our guest of honor for the evening, Ms. Renita Bhaskar, the Minister Councillor, Head of Trade and Economic Section, Delegation of European Union to India. She joined the EU delegation in September 2020. She has a wide experience of trade negotiations, having worked as senior coordinator for the EU-US Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership negotiations from October 2012 till September 2015. Besides experience in trade policy, Renita Bhaskar has also worked in the field of environmental policy in Directorate General of Environment from 2004 to 2008 on issues related to climate change. A very warm welcome, Ms. Renita Bhaskar. It's a privilege, ma'am, to have you here. Thank you for accepting our invite and taking time from your busy schedule and joining us this evening. May I request you to kindly address our attendees. Over to you, ma'am.
Very good afternoon to you, and thank you very much for this invitation. What I think I'll do rather for today is you introduced me already, so I don't need to go back into it. I had the privilege to sit and listen to some of the work and the activities of the chamber, so we will not want to go into that again. But maybe just to give you a few words on where EU-India trade relations, trade and investment relations lie at this point in time, and the plans that we have for the future. And I'll try to keep it brief. And maybe if your participants have a few questions in terms of that, we can try and answer that so as to make it a bit more proactive. I haven't come with a ready speech to give to the audience. So the EU delegation here in New Delhi, I'm based in New Delhi, I've been here since the last year, and the delegation is an outpost, and represents the EU institutions out here in India. And our job, besides engaging with Indian stakeholders and the Indian government of matters of interest to EU-India relations, is also to engage with our member state representatives on ground in India, EU member state embassy, and we try to coordinate positions on matters of common interest. In the trade and economic domain, in trade in particular, a lot of the engagement with the European Union, the EU acts on behalf of its member states. So we have quite an important coordinating role. The trade and economic section here, therefore, engages with the government and also works with the member state here to coordinate our positions in this regard. I think it's already been mentioned, the EU and India have a long-standing relationship as far as trade and investment is concerned. It also happens to be a significant one, and it is growing. Today, bilateral trade is around 100 billion euros, and EU FDI flows into India represent about 11% of Indian FDI flows. So this is certainly a significant relationship, but at the same time, it is also a joint recognition on both sides that the potential for growth in the significant relationships is also quite consequential. And this is something that we have acknowledged time and time over. And one of the things that hampers this growth is that we still continue to face a number of trade and investment barriers, which are stopping this trade to reach its full potential. We see issues ranging from increases in custom duties to things related to restrictions in public procurement, or it could be regulatory matters related to what we call our non-tariff behind the border measures. I'm sure on the Indian side also, they do feel that the trade from India to the EU could be facilitated and things could be done better. It is therefore in taking into account this context that in the most recent meetings between the Indian political leadership and EU political leadership, a decision was taken collectively that between Prime Minister Modi and the EU 27, that there is a possibility to do something together to make a marked change. And it was the meeting took place in May, and our respective leaders agreed on a set of outcomes that reflect the importance. And notably, some of those outcomes was to restart negotiations for a balanced and ambitious free trade agreement, to start negotiations for a standalone investment protection agreement, and also to start negotiations for an agreement of geographical indications. At the same time, we also agreed that there is a need to find solutions for some of the long-standing market access barriers, because we do know trade negotiations take a long time, and this is not the first time that the EU and India have been entered into FTA negotiations. So we want some immediate quick wins, and at the same time, we want to engage constructively with the government of India in finalizing ambitious agreements. We have a bilateral track. I imagine what is of less interest to this group, but nonetheless it is important for people working in trade and economic affairs. Our leaders also agreed to set up a dialogue on matters related to multilateral trade, so matters related to the World Trade Organization, where we would try and engage bilaterally to try and prepare positions and coordinate our positions. Often, both the EU and India are very important players in the bilateral forum, And it is helpful. The more we talk, the more we understand each other. At the same time, we leaders also saw with the impact that the pandemic has had on businesses and supply chain that there is a need to do more technical work, and notably address, and they agreed to set up 2 working groups, one to talk about regulatory cooperation, because increasingly many of the barriers that trade and investment flows face relate to behind the border issues, regulatory measures. And in addition, we agreed to set up a group to look into resilient supply chains. So we are now working, those are very, very ambitious objectives, and both sides are now working towards preparing these trade and investment negotiations and preparing the establishment of these working groups so that we can come back the year after to report something to our leaders. At this point in time, you will ask, where are the negotiations? The negotiations are still to start, but we are working on our side, at least where the EU is concerned, to prepare our positions for these negotiations, and that requires engagement with our member states and also engagement with industry. And the hope is that we will have a first meeting with our Indian interlocutors sometime later this year. And then there will be a formal start to the negotiations, which we hope can move progress fast, because we already have a certain baggage, and we have been in these, we have been trying to negotiate before. And mindful also of that, we want to make sure that this does not go on forever and ever, that there's a beginning and the end to this process. So that's what we're doing on the bilateral trade and investment front, and that's going to color most of the work that we have. And of course, industry will play a key role on both sides, because trade and investment agreements are there to facilitate your daily work and facilitate the flow of goods and services and funds. So input from industry would, of course, be extremely pertinent and welcome. In addition to this sort of negotiating work, we are also working in different forums with the Indian government on a few key priorities. We believe these are priorities that we have a shared interest on furthering. One is in the area of digital transformation, which is fundamentally changing how societies are living and how we trade and how we function. And there we are increasingly in different forums, having regulatory exchanges with the Indian government. And we are also having this sort of public, private moments of engage. Notably, at this point in time, we are working to prepare a digital investment forum, an EU-India digital investment forum, which brings together policymakers from both sides and the key companies from both sides. But over and above that, there will also be opportunities for engagement for startups and incubators, etc. So there are things that we are working on the digital space. Part of our work that we do, and in fact, it's mainstreamed across all our work, is, and there's no end to collaboration there, but clean energy and environmental issues are our main challenge for all of us collectively. And we expect that this will also be the core of our collaboration with India in the near future in all domains. We certainly work from a regulatory point of view, but we also hope that the FTA and the investment agreements act as a boost to encourage more sustainable trade, and also encourage investment flows in both directions for a cleaner and greener transition. So this is something Europe has taken on ambitious targets to become climate neutral by 2050, and we need to ensure that these priorities are embedded in everything that we do. Apart from that, the agenda is our relations with India. It's an extremely rich one. We have cooperation on trade and investment, certainly, but we also have a very active cooperation with India in all other matters, be it social issues, environmental, climate, and political affairs. So I think I will probably stop here, and I don't know if some of your audience members have any questions on what the EU delegation does, or any comments on EU-India trade and investment relations, and I'd be happy to try and answer that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bhaskar. As I said, it was a pleasure to have you. And you shared so much of information on the bilateral trade and investment opportunities. And definitely, I would encourage our attendees, in case you have any question related to Ms. Bhaskar, she'll be happy to address. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have almost come to an end of our part one. And I would like to invite Mr. Piyush Kaushik, the Vice President of EU Chamber. He is the head Healthcare Innovation Center and business leader of Philips India Limited, and joined Philips in the year 2017. Piyush led diverse businesses in startup, growth, realignment, and turnaround situations, including set up a global technology center in Pune, realignment of several global R&D centers worldwide, and turn around the businesses by improving product profitability and operational efficiency. He holds a Master of Technology from Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, India, and Leadership Education from IND, Switzerland. Mr. Kaushik, congratulations on being re-elected as the Vice President of the Chamber. So it's been a really amazing year, and we really look forward to work with you in future as well. So may I request you to kindly formally conclude the part one.
Thank you. Thank you, Anvita, for handing over to me, and really appreciate everyone. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Council of EU Chamber and from my end as well, I would like to thank you, guest of honor, Ms. Ranita Bhaskar, who has come over here from her busy schedule as a guest of honor for today, 29th annual general meeting here. I would like to thank you for sharing EU-India trade relations current status and also plans, including trades, different initiatives, negotiations, supply chain impact due to COVID, engagement with industries, and also public and private engagement to further develop EU-India trade relationship and trades. So really would like to thank you to you, ma'am. And also I would like to thank you, Dr. Renu, to help us to go through what we have achieved last 1 year with different initiatives and activities. So ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thanks for this first session, and back to you, Anvita.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kaushik. With the permission of the speakers, can we please have a picture, like a group picture? May I request everybody to kindly turn on their webcams so that my backend team can capture a picture. May I request the team to kindly take a picture on the count of 3. 1, 2, and 3. Thank you so much. Thank you to all our speakers. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of the part 1 of the AGM. We will here take a 5 minutes break. Please stay tuned and enjoy the videos of our sponsors, and we will be right back in 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience. Now it's time for us to begin with our panel discussion. Allow me to introduce the moderator for this evening, Mr. Ashok Bharat, past president of EU Chambers. Mr. Bharat is a qualified chartered accountant and company secretary. He retired in 2016 as the managing director and chief executive officer of Forbes and Company Limited. Mr. Bharat has held responsible and leadership positions in various Indian and multinational organizations, both in India and overseas. Our first panelist is Mr. Raghav Raj Kanoria, Managing Director of India Power Corporation Limited. He has 8 years of experience in the power and financial service sector. He has been largely responsible for India's power strategy in consolidating its position as a leading power distribution utility in India and in setting the vision to transform India Power into a global power utility. He is actively involved in various national as well as international forums and chambers. He is currently the chairperson for East and Northeast Regional Council for the Indo-Canadian Business State Council, the National Infrastructure Council, as well as the National Committee on Power for the Chamber. Our second panelist is Mr. Sudeep Mall, Managing Director, Huhtamaki India Private Limited. Mr. Sudeep has been the Managing Director of Huhtamaki India, a Finnish MNC, since January 2021. He is passionate about bringing to life company's ambition to be the first choice for sustainable packaging. He has extensive senior leadership experience in transforming businesses in India and international markets. Our third panelist is Mr. Dibirat Sen, Managing Director, Head Banking North India, HSBC Limited. Dibirat is a corporate banking professional with 22 years of experience spread across various roles in HSBC, Standard Chartered Bank, and ICICI Bank. Dibirat also manages 2 other strategic roles for HSBC in India. One, he acts as the HSBC India CEO representative in North India for public engagements, industry bodies, governmental interactions, wherever required. And secondly, he leads the Sustainable Finance Initiative for HSBC in India and is part of HSBC's Asia Pacific Policy and Governance Committee for Sustainable Finance. Our fourth panelist is Professor Subhashish Chaudhary, Director, Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, and K.N. Bajaj Chair, Professor, Department of Electrical Engineering. He did his BTech in Electronics and Communication Engineering from IIT Kharagpur in 1985 and MSc in Electrical Engineering from University of Calgary in 1987 and PhD in Electrical Engineering in 1990 from University of California. He joined IIT Bombay as Assistant Professor in Department of Electrical Engineering in November 1990. He has held a number of positions at IIT Bombay. He has over 100 journals and 200 conference publications with 9,000 citations. He has authored 7 monographs and filed 13 national international patents. He has guided 27 PhD students and 115 MTech students. A very warm welcome to all our panelists and our moderator, Mr. Ashok Bharat. We are eager to listen to the panel discussion. Mr. Bharat, may I request you to kindly begin with the panel discussion?
Thanks, Advita. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for setting the tone for the conversation that will follow. I compliment the EU Chamber for having chosen a very topical subject. And it is not topical only in a contemporary sense, but I think overall for the long-term existence of this planet and our existence and well-being. So therefore, there could not be a more better subject for discussion this afternoon. What makes it even more appropriate is the fact that we are talking about this in the backdrop of our engagement and association with the European Union. Because when I tell you about some of the things that EU or Europe in particular has been in the forefront and the front runner for many of the things that we today take for granted, but many of these ideas actually originated from Europe. And let me give you a few examples. The whole concept of transfer pricing between companies engaged in trade and commerce, between related entities spread across the world, the whole concept of having a legislation and principles governing the rules of transfer pricing originated from Europe. It was partly a reason for them because of the fact that within a limited geography, they have many countries and there are companies which have got multiple units in various jurisdictions. But so necessity could have been the mother of invention, but nonetheless, it was a major step which now regulates the conduct of related parties across various jurisdictions. The second interesting thing is about the international accounting standards. Over the years, different countries have had different accounting standards, as a result of which it was a nightmare for accountants to first consolidate it, but more importantly, to translate that into a common denominator, which investors from a global perspective could understand. This whole concept of an IFRS or an international accounting standard again originated from Europe. So this is one of their other contributions. In recent times, the whole concept of data privacy. This also originated from Europe. They have the most advanced legislation, which is used as a bellwether for determining the relevance of our data privacy policies and guidelines and practices. And last but not the least, which is a little controversial again, which has come from Europe, is the minimum corporate tax for global companies which are operating, and they do a lot of tax planning by situating themselves in so-called tax-friendly jurisdictions. But this minimum corporate tax is again something that thought has come from Europe. So we are going to see more and more of Europe in anything that requires intellect and forward-looking thought. So ESG is not an exception. So the fact that we have chosen to have EU as a benchmark for discussions today, though I would leave it open for the panelists to take up any examples from other jurisdictions as well, because it's important to get a global view of this. But any example of Europe or any context to Europe would be particularly appreciated, but it is not mandatory. So ESG has got three elements, which is environment, social, and governance. In this particular panel, I'm going to stick to E and S. G, enough has been written about. We have fairly active regulators, and now we have proxy advisory firms, and I think there's a lot of debate and consciousness about governance. And this has happened post-liberalization and lastly in the past few years because of a huge investment from private equity and other companies. But E and S are still something that we need to get our arms around. We need to get a handle around it. And I think there are a number of things that we could learn from Europe and other Western jurisdictions. So we will focus largely on E and S and not so much on G, though the subject is covers everything. So with that, what we have done is we have a very curated set of panelists. And I think there is a little bit of an explanation that I wish to give beyond the introductions of individual people that was given by Amrita. So on the manufacturing or the production side, we've got Huhtamaki and India Power. Huhtamaki is in flexible packaging, and plastic is a big subject when we talk of E as an area of concern. And similarly, India Power is a hybrid power producer. It's a distribution company. It has thermal power, and it has also got solar power. So coal and thermal power is again the subject matter for a lot of attention, and therefore insights from them are going to be very useful. So that's one part of the curation. This third panelist is from an international bank. At the end of the day, the people who write the check are the ones who decide the destiny of organizations, and particularly profit-making organizations. Their thought process, their recognition to the need to have a more conscious approach towards the environment is very, very important. So the lender's perspective, the private equity perspective, the finance people's perspective, I think that's a very important part, and we have HSBC with us. The last panelist, but not the least, is an eminent professor. Technology is a great leveler. We will not be able to move, given the kind of comfort and the sense of entitlement now that we have in what we want to have around us, car and all the comforts. unless technology innovates, and technology innovates to a point where products are available to the most common man, who also has an equal amount of aspiration as many of us sitting on the privileged people sitting on this panel, I think this will never work. You know, an army what marches on its does not march on an empty stomach. So therefore, there has to be technology that will enable the adoption of appropriate technology for making products and services available to the common man at an affordable price. So it's a very curated list of panelists that we have. I'm going to throw open the questions. I have about half a dozen of them. I will open it to a particular panelist, but I leave it to others to also butt in if they have any point of view. And of course, we will round it up with a round of questions that I will see on the chat box, and I'll pick up a few and have them answered if time permits. So our opening batsman panelist is Mr. Sudeep Mal, who is a very dear friend. So therefore, I could take the liberty of calling upon him. And I have a slightly longish question so that he has lesser time to answer, but nonetheless. So there is no disagreement that being a responsible corporate citizen is the only way to create a sustainable business model, acceptable to consumers, employees, lenders, investors, and all other stakeholders. In fact, today, even employees, when they come for senior management position interviews, they ask about your environment consciousness. But developing countries are constantly grappling with this problem, that if we adopt a Western style of consciousness towards environment and other practices, will it destroy my competitiveness, or will it make my products and services so unaffordable that a large mass of people who actually form the bulwark of our consumers will get deprived, or they will find it completely unaffordable? And in fact, in the last few months, the poor experience that Sri Lanka had, which of moving to organic tea and organic agriculture produce, has only confounded this fear and exacerbated the problem. But this is a debate, Sudeep, you must have seen in your companies. The balance between business imperatives and the balance of and looking after the world. How did this debate get resolved? What are the principles that you use to resolve this debate? Over to you, Sudeep.
Thank you, Mr. Bharat. I think that's a great question. But I would now start with a statement that whether ESG agenda is good or bad for developing markets like India, I think that point is already over, and I consider and I believe that the ESG agenda train has already left the station. And there are two reasons for that. One is, of course, the time of adoption between developed markets, for example, EU and India, the gap has been reducing a lot. And the second one is the new generation of consumers and employees who we see, the millennials. There's a great lot of commonalities among them who are our new employees and who are our new consumers. So the question right now is ESG is not just for ticking boxes. It is not just for managing risk and regulatory reasons, but it's a great value creation opportunity. And that's something I think the sooner the entire corporate world in India realizes, and which is the learning from Europe, better it is. And I'll just give you an example of one private equity company, the CVC Partners, who manage around $111 billion of assets. Their managing partner mentioned that those who don't have an ESG agenda, it is easier for us to acquire them. That's the value that we can create. So as I see it, the biggest opportunity is for the tone to start from the top. Whether the successful companies, like my company in Huhtamaki, it has to come from the senior leadership team, the global executive team, the local country management. First is it embedded into the purpose culture of the company. And if you look at Hutamaki's purpose, our purpose clearly is woven around ESG agenda, which says that we protect people, planet, and food. And if you look at our value, the first value is care, and it clearly says that we care for our employees, we care for our customers, and we care for our communities. But once it is there in purpose and values, in management, as we know that if nothing gets measured, it doesn't get done. So one of the key things that we have seen and learning from my parent company, Huhtamaki, is that we have very clearly articulated numbers on ESG agenda. For example, we in our 2030 ambition, we very clearly say that 100% of our packaging, because we are in, as you rightly pointed out, we are in plastic packaging, 100% of our packaging would be either recyclable or reusable or compostable. We'll be 100% carbon neutral. 100% of our electricity would be from non-conventional energy. And then each of our senior management team has very clear KPIs which goes into our annual goals. And that everyone gets measured. For example, our CEO, or if I in India, the first thing that we look for operations is safety, EHS KPIs. So I think the big one is that first of all, it has to be embedded part of the culture of the company. And the second one is the good thing about S, as you rightly pointed out. The two things which we forget is, other than community, is employees and customers. And it is great business sense to engage employees and engage customers. So, for example, we have NPS, which is a Net Promoter Score, for both our employee population as well as for our customer population. And research has proven, and it is fact-based, that any company which is improving its NPS with customers, or it is improving NPS with employees, 100% would be doing better than the industry and would be adding value. So, and then of course, I'll just to on the community side, if you look at, we recently, Huhtamaki invested in 600,000 euros in Mumbai on Mithi River cleaning project, which was basically, as you know, Mithi River is the heart of Mumbai. And we brought in new technology from Finland, which is from a startup, and that technology is being piloted on Mithi River, because as you know, a lot of waste goes into Indian Ocean, Arabic Ocean from Mithi River. So collect that waste and recycle it, and at the same time empower the communities. And if you ask employees, any company which is focused on this social dimension, which is driving customer engagement, employee engagement, and social engagement, definitely scores very well. I can talk to you from my personal experience. I have two sons. They are not very interested if I talk to them about how much money our company is making or if my EBITDA margin is improving. But when I tell them about Mithi River project, their eyes light up. So I would really like to say that, so I'd like to end my point by saying that one is, it all depends on how serious the company is, whether it is woven into the DNA of the company with purpose, clear measures, values, and if the company is putting its money where its mouth is, then it's a great value creation opportunity. It is not just about managing risk. Thank you, and back to you, Mr. Bharat.
Thanks a lot, Sudeep. I think that was very, very useful. And I think this point that you made, that this is not about just semantics, this is not about cosmetics, this is about conviction and commitment. And I think organizations need to walk the talk. If they don't do that, and if they're not willing to live with the pain of this transformation, I think it is they are doomed to failure. And I think they will bring along with it the failure of the entire consciousness that they have to create, that they're required to create among their stakeholders. So they have a responsibility for creating that. My next question is actually to Divira. And I've always been very intrigued about this. There are two things that I would actually ask you. So one is that, disruptive or even innovative ESG is always fraught with risks. Based on your experience, that's my first question. what pushed companies or what pushes companies to adopt a ESG strategy despite these risks? Is it the compulsions of a regulation or own conviction or pressure from investors or lenders? I mean, in your experience, different societies have got different ways to, get motivated to do it. In India, it's a mixed bag. We are always looking for regulations to provide the kick, if I may say, the kick on the back. And sometimes we are looking for a lollipop for incentives, but very little is done by way of conviction. But the European experience and as a global bank, your experience might have been different. And my second is that when you, as a lender, look at an institution's ESG agenda, what are the things that you really look for in order to get a conviction that this is a serious effort and this is just a cosmetic effort? So over to you, Divya.
Thank you, Mr. Bharat. So I'll try to answer both the questions in sequence. As you rightly said, there are quite a few factors which act and shape the response of any particular enterprise to the ESG initiative. And sometimes it is not just one, but it could be multiple set of factors. Now, overall, I think Mr. Sudeep also mentioned about his son's interest. That's essentially the world that we live in, which is where sustainable living, social responsibility, those have come to the forefront of the public thought process. I think at a very broad level, that is probably one of the biggest catalysts, because if you are a smart enterprise, if you are looking at your customers, if you're looking at your stakeholders, if you're looking at your regulators, you know that there is a shift which is happening. If you have not noticed it, you run the risk of being left out. But I would go to the extent to say that there is a tectonic shift happening. And why is it happening? Some of the factors are as follows. So one is, for any enterprise, capital is the lifeblood. And capital has the power to force change. And from that perspective, I think we also touched upon the fact, I think Mr. Sudeep touched upon the fact about the private equity guys, but broadly, if you look at the global pool of capital, there is very clearly a shift that they have voiced and indicated that they would gradually move away from anything which is non-ESG and would want to ideally have 100% of the portfolio as ESG. I mean, very recently you saw some reports about largest sovereign fund, which is the Norwegian fund, which has been pressured by a lot of its stakeholders to move completely into 100% green. You also have seen how some of the global oil and gas stocks have underperformed market vis-a-vis some of the new age companies who are seen as more green, more socially responsible. So all this in terms of the capital is definitely having an impact. But we cannot absolutely take away the fact that today's customers are far more demanding. And it's the Gen X. If you're looking at Gen X as your next set of clients, they are far more demanding in terms of asking you questions about what is the process you follow in getting the product to market and what are your overall philosophies. And then you have investors who are constantly, trying to put pressure on the boards to come up with a properly articulated ESG policy. So there is a whole host of factors at play here, not one. But I think coming to the Indian context, the change that is happening is definitely slow, without a doubt, but there is nevertheless a change happening. And that change, of course, is most visible at the top tier of the market, which is where we have the top tier customers. Some of them, in fact, if you look at the Indian example, I think while all of us are talking ESG, I can definitely cite Tatas as an example who have been, living these values for a very long period of time. I mean, some of the work they've done in Jamshedpur some 4 decades back, something that people can only aspire for. So there were a certain set of corporates who have always followed that. But I think because of the pressure that some of these companies who are listed and who have to deal with global pool of capital, they are changing their ways. But the proof of their action will be visible once we really see that there are some board approved policies and a roadmap of where they want to achieve. And therefore, you will hear a lot about net zero. I think most companies today, at least at a global level, have voiced their net zero plans within a certain time period. Some are talking 2030, some are talking 2040, some are talking 2050. But this is a shift which is irreversible. And it's like a telecom revolution, which happened that, from the fixed line telephony to the mobile telephony, the shift was very fast. Similarly, I have been myself amazed the shift that I'm finding within the Indian context as to how many more companies are talking to us to understand things better, talking to us to figure out how they can do stuff in a more green manner, or how is it that capital pools, be it debt or equity, can help us make that transition. So that's the first part of your question. The second part of your question is that what about HSBC? I think from that perspective, I would say that the most important thing for us was a conviction that we would actually want to be a market leader in that space, because we believe that this will be a differentiator in the long run compared to our peers. And therefore, we really, really need to build our strengths on this particular aspect and sector and the whole discipline for us to be real market leaders, because we absolutely think as an opportunity, and not being in this space is actually an opportunity loss. There are quite a few studies which peg the opportunity loss at certain figures, but those figures are very gigantic. So being a globally important, significant financial institution, there is absolutely no question that we want to really, really be in this space as a leader. Towards that, we have in October 2020 announced that we would invest and finance up to $1 trillion in this space. We also have our own net zero journey, which has been spelled out in public. And I think we are making quite good progress globally, and a lot is being done in India as well in the last 2 years.
So do you think that, large banks like you, which multinational banks like you would do this? Do you think that the rest of the Indian banking system would also follow suit? At least the bigger private banks, if not the public sector banks?
Absolutely, Mr. Bharat, because I can cite you one example. The first green loan that was done in this country was by us in January of 2020. And today, the number of green loans are way higher. And we are not the only one. I can only tell you that there are other banks who are following this path. Give you another great example. We launched a product called Green Deposit in August 2020. And while we have a very substantial scale up, which has happened in the last 1 year, but you have seen the recent press that HDFC Limited has actually come up with a product of that kind. So it is only natural that the moment banks have to realize two things. One is that transition risk management has to be a core part of their risk management architecture. And number two, sustainability, which is essentially an intersection of three things: people, planet, and profitability. There is also a profitability angle. So if you can actually look at this in a holistic manner, there is no reason why you would not really want to go, because as I said, otherwise there is an opportunity loss. So we would see more and more local banks also walk this path. This space is only going to evolve and develop and become.
Yeah. The reason why I asked this question, that it will be of great interest to many of our members, because they would know what to prepare themselves for when they go for the next round of funding, or they go to the next lender for negotiations or taking a fresh loan. So I think it's a good preparation point, and that's why I wanted to drive on this point. Just shifting gears now, this is a question that I will actually put to both Subhashish and Raghav. So Subhashish, there is a word called innovation. And this is something that is very, very important to us, because we've always found a way to adapt the most sophisticated technology and make it work in a way that makes the end product or service affordable for a country like ours, where we have a huge issue of an aspirational population, but not having the economic means to doing it. So obviously, in order to, even in this sustainability agenda, technical institutions will have to play a very big role. So besides the normal research and the academic part of their work, a very large part of it will have to be application-led. so that they can use the technology and give it to Indian companies to be able to adapt. On the flip side, we have Raghav, who is a recipient of this technology, and particularly he's in spaces where he needs this innovation a lot. So after you finished, I would ask Raghav that does he think that Indian technology institutions and education institutions provide him with the support and provide him with the kind of things that he's looking for? And does he have a wish list which is much bigger than what he's currently getting? So over to you, Subhashish, first.
Thanks, Ashok. I think it's an interesting question. Like, where would you like to, provision institutions like IIT Bombay or others in this particular ESG domain? I think, as we said, mostly at the E and S part of it. And see, let's say if you look at a particular technology today, it may not be affordable today, okay? But maybe after some years, if you persist, it becomes very, very affordable. For example, like solar cell, I can say that, right? The power that happened initially is a green energy, okay? And we know that what are the issues, we talk about that. But then, if we had immediately jumped into something, probably it would have been a disaster. Now, if you look at today in India, what is happening, that our target, everything has been raised to that level slowly, so that by the time the overall, the cost, it become very, very effective now. It's even cheaper than the regular one. So when it comes to places like IIT and others, first thing to see that, our teaching as well as the innovation is in terms of telling the people or the students to understand what are the constraints. Now, every part in the history as you evolve, the constraint set, one is a purely technical part. The secondly, these are the constraints that your E and S part adds to your solution domain, right? And because of that, if you remove these constraints, I can get one set of solution, okay, which would maybe much cheaper, maybe affordable, but which is not a sustainable one, right? So we try to put this in our system at the time of the training the students, right? So you look at any kind of proper training, even if it is, forget about other things, pure computation science, okay? We talk about whether it is computation efficient, whether it is memory efficient, okay? Because today you talk about a lot of data, and data centers consume so much of energy. So can you design things which are actually efficient in those sense? Similarly, we talk about, let's say, chemical science, which is one of the main reasons. If you look at today, I think the whole consciousness in terms of India and many other places happened because of, I think, the Union Carbide accident. Before that, that kind of thing never happened in India. So if you look at it, so can we have something which is more like a green chemistry, green chemical science, right? So if you build into your system so that students know that they were aware, okay? And because of that, I know that this may be little, maybe more expensive than the general solution, which is not so much constrained, then I can actually get something which is tomorrow. Now, to get into this, I give you a very simple example, okay? And why this is important. See, once I think I spent about a week, as a, guest of a professor in Germany. And I stayed with the person. And then once you're going and shop somewhere, and then I find it's a neighborhood small shop, and it was quite expensive compared to something that if you buy somewhere a little far up in a bigger shop. So I told my friend, Eckhart, this guy is very expensive. Why are you buying it from there? You can buy it from the other shop, right? Which is very common in Indian, perspective. And I was that time probably 30, 32. And what was his answer? He said, Subhashish, you have to understand that this guy has to make a living. Unless I buy it from him, I don't have a shop in my neighborhood, right? Now that's an attitude, right? So this attitude may have a cost implication. But if, you may say that at some point, all parts of our society may not be actually, for them it's easy. And for the cost of an attitude. So when you look at, we can create an awareness, we may try to do it, but the society as a whole, and in India, we have a different strata, right? So at what level, right? So I cannot completely cut off the lower part of it, but at the same time, we have to survive for tomorrow, right? any business model has to survive. But so there has to be some kind of a judicious link. And that's what we try to train our students in terms of whatever it is. If it is a green chemistry, if it is like a green computing, this is where they should be thinking that no solution is actually unconstrained. I think that's the mother of all lessons that we try to do it. And that is what I think will tell us the next time that yes, today we have all of them. Tomorrow there is some other agenda comes in. Can you also build into your solution domain? I think that's what we are looking at.
Thank you so much for that. In fact, it has given rise to another question, but I'll just ask that in a little while. But over to you, Raghav. So, what is it that you expect from technology institutions, research institutions that will help you? You're dealing with the challenge of being in an industry of two parts of your business. One part of it is something that is under so much of criticism, and the other one which is forward-looking. So, your expectations from educational institutions and research institutions. I think that would be a very useful insight to get.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Bharat. Before I begin, I'll just like to thank the EU Chamber of Commerce and the office bearers to include me in part of the esteemed panel. I think I would definitely have a much lesser experience in the field compared to my friends on the panel, but I'll attempt to give a perspective of the power sector, which is a significant contributor to the current carbon emissions in the overall space. I would say 50% of the carbon emissions roughly are contributed from the power sector, out of roughly 2.5 billion tons of carbon emissions annually. Close to 50% is from the power sector. So it's been the biggest polluter from that perspective. I believe as most industries are focusing on turning green and seeing how they can be more ESG compliant, the power sector has taken a lead pushed by the government initiatives, foremost being 175 gigawatt renewable target by 2022 and 450 gigawatt target by 2040, which to all our surprise, I think, is the 2022 target is very much in sight. And even though we thought that it was an impossible target when it was set, I think the government and the stakeholders have made it possible. Also, we see that as per the projections of the government as well as the International Energy Agency, even by 2040, the country, because of its large growing energy needs and because of the way it's structured, still around close to 35% of electricity, even in 2040, will be from coal power generation, from the current 70%, which is quite major shift, I would say. I think before coming to the point on institutions and what role they play, I'll just give a couple of points in terms of what I feel the power sector can learn tremendously from other countries, especially the EU. The biggest transformation which is happening is from coal power generation to renewable in India. And there, the government has a very, very important role to play. And we can learn a lot from how EU has done it over the last few decades. And last year was landmark in the sense that, they have for the first year crossed, renewable generation has crossed generation from fossil fuels, which includes gas as well in the EU. And India is also on track to do that in the next 8 to 10 years, I'm sure. However, when the transition was done, the government, various governments like Germany and some of the other countries in EU, they came up with very focused policies to see that how old and polluting plants can get shut faster, which is important to learn from, and how the newer plants can basically install emission control equipments. And they formed central funds to incentivize all these plants to either shut down or shift to cleaner coal technology in a manner of speaking. And that's something which is quite important and essential in India, because without those incentives, I think the transition is happening, but it's much slower. And as my colleagues earlier mentioned, I would say, as it was mentioned earlier, it's not only about the environment; it's also about social responsibility, governance. So when the transition is happening, we need to take into account the investors, the lenders, the employees who are dependent on the current assets. So when this transition is happening, I think the government can learn a lot from how EU has done this transition, and we estimate that if done in the right manner, it will save close to around 50 to 60 million tons of carbon emission savings annually by doing that in an effective manner, which anyway will happen, but it may take much longer if not done in an organized manner. Second is the power distribution space, which India powers, a constituent also as generation. Here again, our losses in India is very high. It's in the range of 22 to 25% in comparison to EU, which is 7-8%. With the focus on technology, with the focus on new initiatives in the distribution sector, we can learn a lot from how these distribution losses can be reduced to anywhere between 10 to 15%. And the government has put that as a target. But of course, again, a lot of learnings, a lot of new technology investment needs to flow into the sector. And we believe that a 10% saving in AT&C losses will help eventually save close to 100 million tons of carbon annually. So if I look at simple things in the power sector, which anyway has to happen by accelerating it, by learning from what EU countries have done, there is anywhere between 150 to 200 million tons of CO2 can be saved on an annual basis, which is big dent on the current number which we have in India. And I believe that India Power in a small way is contributing as a distribution entity. We are already meeting our renewable purchase obligations of and crossing that, but in the last 4 years itself. But we have taken a target of converting 70% of our portfolio to renewable sources by 2024, and we've already got the approvals and signed contracts to that extent, which will help in saving more than 1 million tons of CO2. And we are also working with utilities to implement smart metering projects, investing in that infrastructure with the governments and utilities. And each of these, the current project which we're doing in MP, for example, it's a small project, 350,000 meters only, but that itself will help in saving close to 200,000 tons of CO2 annually. So I think there are a lot of small things which can be done in the power sector, which will go a long way. And of course, as I said earlier, that we can learn a lot from EU. But coming specifically to your question, I think because the Indian environment, both from the distribution sector, the power sector, the kind of resources we have is very different. So educational institutions, technical institutes, they play a very important role in understanding what has happened globally in these sectors and basically catering to the Indian utilities, the Indian customer in a way which can be implemented in a more cost-effective manner and can be implemented faster, because other countries had the luxury of doing it over the past 20 or 25 years in the power sector. We probably have to do it in the next 10 years or probably even earlier, looking at the kind of alarms and red alerts which are arising globally due to climate change and incidences. So I don't have any specific example of what can be contributed, but I believe that already educational institutions, technical institutes are playing a very big role in this transformation. I think most of the companies, most of the government utilities are engaged with institutes to help in adapting these technologies to the Indian environment, whether it be in terms of power distribution, power generation, power transmission, I think they have an extremely important role, especially by collaborating with the EU institutes, with their universities. They can again bring in a lot of efficiencies in the power sector.
Thanks a lot, Raghav. In fact, that's very useful. In fact, I'm going to come back to that again in a slightly different way. But moving away from E to S. Now, many of us in this room belong to a generation where we knew that we had to store the newspaper so that it could be sold to a rabjiwala, and that would include bottles. It could mean chappals. It could mean anything. So whilst we were driven by a sense of frugality, because that's the generation that we belong to, I think unwittingly we were doing a lot for the environment in our own way, which of course was not conscious, but it was a natural outcome of it. But I'm now moving to the new generation, which has not had this lessons in frugality. And you are getting a workforce which is completely different from what you and I belong to in terms of our values and thoughts. Coupled with that is the paradox that in India, despite this element of consciousness, there are many things about our social infrastructure which are still rooted deeply in customs, regional beliefs, and so on and so forth. So my question to both Sudeep and Raghav, because you handle large workforces who come from very different backgrounds, how do you inculcate this S element of thought, which is the social element of thought, which is gender equality, non-discrimination, etc. There are many elements of this. It could even mean, say, posh, for example. That's a very big thing. Gender sensitivity. What is it that you can do to help that? Any experiences? So Sudeep, you first.
I think the first point is that the millennial generation in India, from all studies that I have seen, are as aware as any millennial generation in whether it's in EU or US. So that is the first, and I'm sure if we ask our professor here from IIT Bombay, he would vouch for that. That this generation is very ESG aware. But to make it really S factor integral, I think it has to make great business sense, because nothing can be forced on the corporate world. I think it has to make intuitively, and it has to be good for business only, and it will be embraced. And if we look at those companies in Europe or in India, I think the example of Tata's was cited earlier. You see that all the companies who are social conscious, which is basically, personally, I see there are three levers to the S factor. One is the workplace, the second is the marketplace, and the third is, of course, the community. Now, employees, and I have, when I see to young employees, I can see it very well, that they feel really that sense of pride if they feel their company is really caring for the environment, if they feel that it is it's an inclusive workplace, if it is a fair workplace. I think it is highly engaging, and I'm sure, and I think all of us are aware about the Gallup study, which said that an engaged workforce, actually the returns to those companies are multiple times. They are in the top tier of performance. Now, on the consumer and the customer side, if the entire customer journey is much more engaging, and that's what the corporate focus on, and the NPS of customers improve, the returns are that much more. It pays back in terms of market share increase. So, and of course, community is very clear. So my point, Mr. Bharat, would be that that we perhaps, you and me belong to the Generation X, but we perhaps underestimate how aware our millennial generation is. They're highly aware. They're the new employees of the future. They're our consumers and they're our customers. And those companies which are taking definite actions, they are seeing much higher employee engagement, much higher customer engagement. From my industry, I can talk about when I talk to my customers, one of the areas which perhaps they really appreciate is our very clear goals around ESG, whether it's in the area of sustainability, whether it is around on the social factor of what we do for the employees or fair marketing practices. Even our community focus, some of the investments that we are making at community is things like Anganwadi project, Nandadhar project, which is all about empowering kids. It is about improving gender sensitivity. So my final point would be that it makes a lot of economic sense for the companies, and there is no doubt or no question or any hesitation that companies who have to walk on this path.
Would you no? But Sudeep, let me ask you a little provocative question. Would your voice be so strong and your conviction so confident if we were to talk about the staff working in your remote factories? While this may be largely true of your corporate office, would you be able to say that with the same great confidence of one of your plants in a very backward area of the country? The workers there, are they also so conscious? Are they also so gender sensitive? Would you be safe, or feel confident about having women workers in your plant? Is that percolating down to the lowest levels in society? That is also a question that I would want an answer to. Either you can answer or Raghav can answer, because he's also into that area, because you both employ a very large number of people, and that's where the question is.
Actually, we have plants in extreme north and extreme east of the country. For example, in Baddi, we have it in Rudrapur. Even in those places, I think and I'm a great believer in it, that we actually sometimes discount the commonalities and the values of people, whether they are in Mumbai or in Rudrapur or Baddi. I think all of them value good employee practices, which a company is treating fair, company is encouraging an inclusive workplace, it's an ethical company, and also it cares for the communities. For example, as a company, we ensure that part of our CSR budget, we empower the local plant manager, for example, whether it's in Baddi or whether it's in Rudrapur, to do work around the plant. And I can tell you, Mr. Bharat, the sense of pride in those workers who see underprivileged community around them getting help from the company, the sense of pride that brings in is immeasurable. So I would really say that these values cut across social strata, they cut across small town, big town, rural areas, and this is something is a must. Doesn't matter where one operates from. Over to you, Raghav, for your comment.
Raghav, would you agree?
No, absolutely. I completely agree. I would go probably a step further for someone like us in the power sector. I would say that if we don't have the social factor in mind when we're looking at power distribution, power generation, because the entire sector is very, very socially sensitive, in the sense that we are supplying electricity to thousands and thousands of customers, where our plants are located in areas where literally it's built around the local communities. So if we don't have S in mind while designing our business policies and taking business decisions, we will be irrelevant in the next few years. And I would say that for all power sector companies, unless they have a very strong social focus, whether it be in terms of the current assets, their employees, and also what they're planning in the future, you will be completely irrelevant, because there are people who are coming up with you will be completely displaced. For example, today, if I talk about again power distribution, I talk about one angle, which is our customers. So a lot of our customers, especially the larger ones, are now demanding that we want to have more renewable mix, because our customers globally, if there are, say, for example, steel producers we supply to, they're insisting that our customers globally, if they're exporting their products, our customers globally want us to meet a certain renewable commitment in our energy. So we have to cater to their needs, and most of our policies are based on how the customer, what the customers want to do, what the employees want to do, and of course, also the community at large. So I think in the sector we are in, S is extremely social impact. The social angle is very, very important, and if we don't have that in mind, we would be completely we would be irrelevant in the next few years.
Thank you so much, Raghav. We're running out of time. So my last question is actually to Devirat and Subhashish again. And this is about, I'm trying to cater to a very large constituency of our membership, which is SMEs. Many of our approaches, whether it's in the form of lending or whether it's in the form of technology, is geared for the larger players. But the way the manufacturing and the supply chain is now developing, a lot of value add will come through a larger ecosystem of smaller players. And those who are driving the, or holding the reins of the larger companies, either in the form of technology or in the form of finance, I think will have to make the agenda of pushing this E and S concept and context down to the lower end of the value chain is going to be very, very important. So how does a bank or a financial institution deal with it, and how does a technological institution, which is, it caters to the interests or the demands of a larger company, but how do they help small and medium enterprises in this? So first Devirat and then Subhashish.
It's a very, very relevant question, Mr. Bharat, because essentially, if you are talking about the net zero objective of any large enterprise, I think in isolation that enterprise cannot deliver it unless the entire ecosystem around it, which is to a large extent its supply base or vendors, etc., also conforming to it, because it all builds up when you build up your own zero charting. I completely agree with you that this is probably, even with whatever has been happening, flow of capital, etc., probably the most underbanked amongst the corporate players. Access to capital is a challenge, cost to capital is a challenge, and survival, especially in the post-pandemic period, is itself quite difficult. In fact, in the country today, we have a situation where we have surplus liquidity, but not enough is reaching to the SMEs, which is having its own sort of vicious cycle. I can speak specifically on what we are doing, and I am aware that certain other global banks are doing similar stuff. The fact that, as I mentioned, that at the end of the day, banking is all about credit risk management. And for me to hand over some pool of capital to an organization, I can do that only when the risks are mitigated. Therefore, we have globally quite a few successful examples of supply chain financing running, which have sustainability linked objectives. I can take, this is in the public domain, so I can take two examples. One is for Walmart and one is for Puma. We have actually rolled sustainability linked supply chain financing solutions for their suppliers, wherein the way it works is that it is no different from a normal supply chain financing, except that the suppliers agree with the anchor corporate as to what are the milestones or goalposts that they need to reach. Once they reach, it leads to a discounting in terms of the interest rate. That has worked very well. And this is something that I am hopeful very soon we should be able to get rolled out. We are already at some advanced stage of discussion with certain constituents of the market. And I believe that this is one product which is a great tool to effect change. Because, it is like if a small enterprise is unable to survive, then you ask it to bear the cost of change, which Professor said that, anything of this costs, you need to also therefore cut his cost somewhere. And for a medium to small size enterprise, finance cost is a very, very significant constituent. Sometimes it often determines whether it will go down belly under. So to that extent, if you have large anchor corporates, and this is where I think the larger corporates will have to play a role, larger financial institutions will have to play a role. If they come together and roll out more of these instruments into the market, it will definitely lead to a change. And as more competition comes in, the more the prices will drop. But I think as far as we are concerned, we are, as I said, we want to be global leaders in this space, and this is something that we are actively looking to help the the bottommost segment of the pyramid.
No, thank you very much.
Walk the path of
yeah, the reason why I asked this question is because the strength of a chain lies in its weakest link, and therefore that is true for any environmental or social agenda as well. So over to you, Subhashish. You might have a view from a technology perspective. How much of your technology is for the small and medium scale sector, and how much is it for the big guys?
So before I answer, come to that point, let me put a different perspective to your question, right? So whether it's academic institutions or a corporate body, right? So when I want to go and teach in a class, what do I want to see? I would personally prefer almost all the students to be of similar type, okay? And then what happens, it's easier for me to train them, and probably they get through that. And similarly, when you're at the corporate level, you would like similar type of customer behavior, similar type of other things, even the employees' behavior, right? So that's what is our expectation, right? So that's like what happens is that the moment you bring in this kind of the particular S that you talked about, right? Now, what happens, it brings in inhomogeneity into the system, right? So when I go to the classroom, not everybody is equally equipped, okay? They come with different diversity. Okay, there are different kind of enablement in a life. Okay, the equity is different, right? So it becomes more difficult, more challenging for people to rise to the level so that everybody gets what's their due. And I think that's what I think. If you really, Devera was also trying to see that, make it more relevant to the individuals at different points. So same thing, corporate. If you have 20 different employees, and if they're all different, right, you have to have your corresponding HR people to handle them. It needs certain kind of, efficacy in terms of to handle them. So if you look at, so that's basically, it's a lot more enriching as a society. I must also tell you, because that's what is more inclusive. So if you look at from our side, now how to encourage? See, you cannot put out, because we are also a government organization, and also if you are really active on this particular sector, I cannot put all my eggs where we have maximum return. That's always the profit maximization, or maybe the maximum return. That's not what we are doing, right? Let's say, for example, we have our, the research part, right, which is coming up in our system. Of course, we could give it to the people who would be more relevant than others, but we said no. A sizable part of that, we should reserve it for all these MSMEs, because they are the people who need us. See, if you look at some big companies, okay, maybe they don't need us so much. But these are the MSMEs, they would need us a lot more. And the country can develop a lot more benefit by actually providing them. Similarly, when we have we have a huge analytical, sophisticated equipment laboratory, which actually does various kind of testing and other kind of chemical, and others biological sample testing. These are expensive things, right? If you belong to Tata's, or if you belong to some other big companies, you can always afford buy it for yourself. MSMEs, they cannot, right? So what we do is that, no, we'll reserve it for them, right? So, and for them also, it may be much cheaper also, right? So you said, of course, we do get certain funding from the government to make sure, because we are a government agency. So that's like our commitment. Let's come to, similarly, let's say we have many of our students who are very much keen in terms of entrepreneurship, right? Now, if you look at everybody's doing in the service-related entrepreneurship, the return is a lot more. That's not what is our purpose, right? So we said we have to be deep tech, and not all deep techs would all be at the highest end. There could be like agri-tech, there could be like med-tech, there could be other things, and also the socially relevant things. Because finally, somebody on the outside the street would see that what IIT and other technical institutions are making a change in their life. And that would happen if we can put it into some of these also into our the improvement or the value chain that we are doing. So we have even reserved them for them, saying that we should go for such kind of companies and give them the opportunity to grow. Of course, we try to find their, whatever they can get their funding from, with mentorship and others. So this will continue. And I think, in my opinion, if you really look at the country has to go up in the value chain by taking care of all this, ESG, then there is a lot of emphasis has to be put at the, this MSMEs. And that's where definitely which is very, very inhomogeneous, highly local, and there are a lot of challenges to them. So we try to see, of course, for one institution, it may not be always good. So we'll try to see whatever in our neighborhood, what we can do. And I think that's where I think collectively is our responsibility to help. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It brings us to the end of our conversation, but we have a very interesting question from Mr. Carlos Barroso. And I think, Raghav, you will have to answer this question. He has this, he says, regarding power generation in India and its complex transition to renewable energies, what do you consider to be the key opportunities of government initiatives where EU companies can participate? This is right up your street, Raghav, and over to you.
Sure, yeah. So I think, the entire power value chain, right from generation to transmission to distribution, everything needs to be, made ready for the large amount of renewables that's going to be pumped into the system. Of course, the first aspect is when I look at power generation itself from renewables. So there are a large number of renewable companies in, EU, which are already present here. Some of the largest companies, I think, are from EU. For example, I know, just to give an example, the largest renewable company, which is Adani Green, has Total as one of the largest investors. So, of course, from an investment perspective, there is a big role that EU has to play. From a technology perspective as well, because solar is now going through a lot of changes in terms of efficiency improvement, in terms of combining itself with storage, which again is not available in India to a very large extent. And I think EU has done a lot of work. So efficiency of solar cells, combining it with storage, these are areas on the generation front again, which can be helpful. If we talk about distribution, there is a lot to be done with EU companies. The transition on renewable basically will impact the way distribution companies work. So working with EU-based companies in the distribution sector, in the metering sector, in even in the transmission sector, has a large number of opportunities. That how do the Indian utilities transition from a very stable sort of base load kind of environment to a lot more interactive grid requirement, which means that the grid has a very major transition which is going to happen. Today, it's only transmitting or distributing power from the substation to the customer. But as we go forward, customers are becoming producers of energy themselves through rooftop solar. So how does a grid manage these kind of complexities? You need to have the necessary technical expertise. You need to also understand from a regulatory perspective, which is very, very early stage in India right now. There are net metering rules which are getting established in various states. So this is probably a topic where we can talk for a long time. But I would say that power generation, especially in terms of the renewables, in terms of efficiency, in terms of storage, and in power distribution, in terms of rooftop solar, smart metering, the even understanding how the policies are changing and how they've changed in EU will help a lot. And there are a lot of collaboration opportunities. I'm sorry, I was a bit general, but I think there is a lot of opportunities. I can't think of one or two very specific examples.
Yeah, but I will just add to that, Raghav. Mr. Barroso, my personal view is that beyond technology, I think one of the things that we can learn in India a lot is the regulatory development that accompanies these kind of technological and tectonic shifts. And we have been very poor at it. And if we can learn something that is already contemporaneous, it will help us cross many generations of reforms, which otherwise in a democracy like us takes too much of time. So I think beyond just technology, the EU delegation or the EU policymakers' intervention with policymakers in India to take us to a level of policy making which has already gone through the process of trial and error will be a great help. And in the past, India has borrowed quite liberally from EU policies. So therefore, there is a history and tradition of adopting EU practices, unlike many other countries where we have not been able to understand their context very well. But with EU, we have a very different kind of a relationship. So I think that's also a very important point that I think not just you, but I think even Renu Shom should take forward from this conversation. There are 2 or 3 things that I would like Renu to take this forward is obviously, how do we help our MSc members take advantage of this conversation? I think that's a very key and important takeaway. And Renu, you might want to put a small task force to look at this. And the second one is, I think on the E and S part, not so much on the G part, I think there is a good case for the chamber to be involved with the EU delegation on helping Indian policymakers. I think that would be a very good way of actually taking advantage of this from a chamber perspective. So with that, thank you so much. I think we've taken more time than what was allotted to us. Thank you, panelists. It was a pleasure. I have actually learned a lot. I have been very keen follower of this ESG, and this idea of having a conversation around ESG when Renu and I were talking came to me because I said, let me take advantage of learning without having to pay for it. So I have gained it in abundant measure, and I've made extensive notes, which I will sometimes unleash on unknowing people who have not participated in this, and they will think it is my own idea. So thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Yes.
So much, Mr. Bharat. Indeed, it was one of the best panel discussions ever, I must say. It was quite interesting. And thank you to all our speakers for sharing their views. Thank you so much. Now, may I invite Mr. Piyush Kaushik to kindly formally propose a word of thanks.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think it was a great second part where we see such a good session. So I sincerely, thanks to our panelists, Mr. Raghav, Mr. Sudeep, Mr. Dibirnath, and Professor Subhashish. And of course, I would like to extend my thank you to our today's moderator, Mr. Ashok Bharat, for conducting such a session so beautifully. A special thanks to all the delegates from various Indian embassies in EU countries, EU embassies in India, and all diplomats of EU consulates for their presence and contribution to make this AGM a good success. Chamber has taken many webinars during the pandemic last year for its member, with purpose of getting the industry together and sharing its common view with regards to promoting trade and commerce between India and European Union. Friends, we assure you that the Council will always strive to promote the trade relations between both regions and undertake many such activities which shall help our members to know about the latest happening with regards to EU trade, EU-India trade. So I would like to thank you and support support given by EU Ambassador, delegation of European Union to India and his office, all the Indian and EU embassies, consulate all these years. And also would like to place and record our sincere thanks to our statutory auditors, Bhatia and Associate, represented by Mr. Umesh Lakhani and his team. Also, Mr. Satish Singh of Satish Singh and Associate and his team for helping the chamber in day-to-day activities related to accounting work. Lastly, my duty would not be incomplete if I do not acknowledge the good work done by the Secretariat led by Dr. Renu Shome in organizing this wonderful event for you. And also, I would like to thank you, all the sponsors, for making this event successful. So with that, we are already out of the time. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I would like to thank you, all of you, for your participation and making this event a good success. Thank you very much and have a good evening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Piyush. Thank you. Thank you to all our speakers, and thank you to Mr. Bharat for having such a great panel discussion. Thank you so much. Once again, I would like to congratulate Mr. Kaushik and Mr. Bhatnagar as the president and the vice president of the chamber. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for attending the webinar, the AGM, and after the AGM, you'll receive the activity report of the chamber. Suggestions and feedbacks are welcomed. The chamber will be happy to incorporate them. Thank you once again. Thank you.